Greetings, this is Amy Wentley with Chai Knuckles Knitting, and this is episode 2020 Orime Collar Extension Seam, Top to Top Seam. I'm teaching a Zoom class on the Orime sweater, which is a Brooklyn tweed pattern by Veronique Avery, and this video is the second in a series of 6 videos. This one's on the collar extension seam. It's a top to top seam. These videos will be coming shortly, and I just finished one on shoulder seaming, so look for that too. So whenever you get started, you're going to want to start with a figure 8 knot, and we'll do that on this, which I will demonstrate shortly. You will come up from the bottom of the right piece and up from the bottom of the left piece, and then up from the bottom of the right piece and pull it tight. If you'd like to see that described a little bit more detail, check out the shoulder seam video. The collar extension is part of the front of the sweater, and there are 2 extensions, the right extension and the left extension. And what you have to do during this finishing process is you need to join those 2 together at the back of the neck. This is what the swatches I'm working with today look like. You don't have to have these pins in here. I just have them for illustrative purposes, and that's to point out the V's on the top piece here. This piece, I guess, would be the right front extension, and this would be the left front extension where they join. You've got the public side facing you. You'll notice too on these extensions that there's 2 stitch border on each side, and they join up, and they will have exactly the same number of stitches. But the one thing that's curious is that since you'll be working with this piece, this one is the right front extension. This one's the left. And you'll be joining them. And the interesting thing, though, is that if they're both oriented this way, they each have the same number of stitches running across the top, and they are V stitches that we're going to be joining together. But when we turn them upside down to abut one another, what happens is these V stitches all of a sudden turn from a V into a hat, you know, a spiked hat like that, like a dunce cap. So if you want to join V's to V's in a seam like this, you actually have to they'll actually be offset, because between every one of the hats at the top is a V. So if you offset the top by a half a stitch, you'll be joining V's to V's, and I will demonstrate that in just a minute. Okay, this is an illustration that shows what we'll be doing. So you go ahead and you'll start out with your figure 8 knot. And then you're going to start with the bottom piece, the piece that's closest to you. And you're going to come up from underneath a V and come into the middle of that V. You're going to bring your yarn and your needle up, and you are going to come under the 2 legs of the V on the top piece. So come under those 2 legs. Okay, that's your V. Okay. Then you come back down and you put your needle back right in where you started. You're going to scooch under the stitches and come up through the next V. You're going to bring your needle up and you're going to come under the 2 legs at the bottom of this V. Come down and come through. And you're going to come under the stitches, and you're going to come up from this V again and under the 2 legs of this V on the top. And you'll be coming down again back where you started, and again come up to the V and continue through the end of the row. Since you have the same amount of stitches in both pieces, you'll be working the same amount of stitches. You won't be skipping anything, but you will end up with half a stitch left over at the end because of it all being offset because the top's upside down. So I will demonstrate that for you. Okay, so here are my two pieces. One neck extension and the other neck extension, and these are public facing. You want to make sure that your neck extensions aren't twisted in any way and that you're working them kind of butt up against each other this way. Okay, so I'm going to start with a figure 8 knot. I'll show you how to do that very quickly. I'm going to come up from the bottom of the one piece. That'll be the top piece here. I'm going to come up from the bottom right at the cast on edge of the bottom piece here. And then I'll come up from the bottom of the top piece again. And that's where you get the figure 8. The one thing too I want to suggest to you when you're seaming is try not to split your yarn, because you'll be pulling this seam tight as we go, and if there's any place where you split the yarn with your darning needle, you're going to have a hard time pulling that yarn. So just be a little extra careful there. So okay, the pattern was written really well because it's got nice borders that make seaming much easier. So you know your border stitch was 2 knit stitches when you did this. So you've got this column of knit stitches and you've got this wonky column of knit stitches. Well, I'm going to come up from the V in the wonky column on the bottom piece, and then I am going to come up to the top piece and I am going to find the 2 legs of the first V, and so that's going to be on the edge here. So do you see where those two, this is a V and I'm coming under the 2 legs of it. I'm going to pull this through, and I'm going to pull it through lightly because I'll be tightening it up later like magic. And so I'm going to come down back where I came in the last time. I'm going to scooch under and I'm going to come up through the next V. That V is right there. Okay. Then I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm actually going to come back in where I came out up here. And I'm going to scooch under the legs of the next V right there. Okay. So you'll notice I'm half a stitch off now. This is, I came up through a half a stitch here, and now I came through a full stitch there. So I'm going to come back down through the V I came up from down here, and I'm going to scooch down into the next V, which is right here. Pull it through lightly, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to find the next V here, which is actually here. It's hidden a little bit because this is reverse stockinette. It's got 2 frowns and a smile, and I'm going to come under there, go back in where I came out, and I'm going to come under the 2 legs of that V. Pull it through lightly, and I'm going to come down through where I came out on the bottom, scooch under, and I'm going to come up through this next V, which is right here. In there, it's a V. So I'm going to come under, go back in where I came out, come under, and come up through the middle of that V on the bottom. Then I'm going to come to the V on the top, come in where I came out before, and I'm going to go under the 2 legs of the next V. See the V there? Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to come back to where I started. I'm going to go under and come up the next V. And then now every 4 or 5 stitches, you'll want to pull tight again. So just go ahead and hold on to the end and pull and pull. And there you go. Magically, you have your seam done. So you were going to go ahead and do that same thing all the way to the end. You're going to end up with half a stitch left over, and that's fine. At the end, you'll go ahead and make a figure 8 stitch, cut off and weave in your ends, and you're done with the collar extension theme, or collar extension seam. So please join me for the next video. For that, we're going to be talking about joining this collar extension to the back of the neck. So please join me for that. Thank you. Bye-bye.